Thank you, Joy. My name's Yolanda O'Heaney, and we're going to be talking about should we be rethinking research and universities. So today I'm joined with Robert Digraph, who's a theoretical physicist and the director for advanced studies in Princeton. Hello, Robert.
Great to see you. A pleasure to be with you.
Great to welcome you here. And we're also joined by the eminent cosmologist, Martin Rees. Good afternoon, Martin.
Hi, hello. Good to be with you too.
Hello. So I'll start by thinking about, of course, you both have been in research for many years, and you must have seen how this shape shifts over time. Now, I was wondering, Martin, how do you think that the UK research institutes and universities should be shape-shifting to the future, and what should we be doing post-Brexit so that we remain world leaders for research?
Right. Well, let me say first of all that Europe is very strong in scientific research, and it's been strengthening in the last 30 years, partly because of EU collaboration, and in particular in the so-called big sciences where you have to have massive equipment. Then Europe is the world leader in particle physics at CERN and in astronomy at the European Southern Observatory. We are way ahead of the United States in those areas because we've collaborated. And there's far more exchange in European countries than there was. And so the answer to your question is that Brexit is a real self-inflicted wound, obviously for Britain, but it's going to be bad for Europe as well because Britain is a strong research centre. So I think Brexit is, for many ways, a disaster.
Yes, and hopefully not too much of a disaster. And I suppose looking towards the US, Robert, you're the director for the Institute for Advanced Studies, which kind of takes a different approach for research, and it was founded in the 30s. Now, could you just tell us a little bit more about the centre?
Well, I think the Institute is very different than many other research institutes because it's somehow very simple principles. It's trying to attract the best people from the world and then essentially get out of the way. So when particularly young researchers come here, they are fully empowered to continue their own research program. Our professors are basically not evaluated. There is no grants application. So I think it's kind of a wonderful experiment that has shown to be extremely successful. I don't think it's for no reason that Albert Einstein actually decided to come here. And I think it also points to something which I think is a great strength of the United States, is that it has a great diversity of institutions. There are research universities, small colleges. There are places like my institute, which is basically not really replicated anywhere. And I think it's this rich ecosystem that actually helps to foster and advance the research enterprise. And there are many things wrong in the United States, but I think one thing that people have this sense of experimentation also at the level of institutions. And I must say, it's partly also possible because we are to a large extent a private organization. So we're supported by philanthropy, by individuals who care for this kind of lofty mission of pushing research without any attention to immediate applications.
And what do you say to kind of the naysayers who are saying, should we allow just this intellectual freedom of exploration?
Well, I think it's what I would say, it's not everything should be like this, but it's a crucial ingredient in the whole spectrum of research. And actually, if I look into the future and see the enormous challenges that we have as a world and how to educate our young people and produce more breakthrough research, I think we need better ideas. We need more creativity. And it's there's such a potential for scientific discovery, for new ways of thinking, that we need places where people feel liberated.
And Martin, do you think that the UK should be looking towards these kind of institutions within our university system?
Well, I think places like Oxford and Cambridge have essentially all the benefits of the Princeton Institute, but I do share Robert's view that there should be some places where people can just do sort of blue skies research. And to take one obvious example, mentioning Einstein, the laser was invented in 1960. It used ideas, some of which came from Einstein 40 years earlier, and the people who invented it had no idea that the laser would be used for DVDs and eye surgery and things like that. So the transition from some basic ideas to the technology is very long term and involves lots of styles of thinking. So we do need to have people who can think far ahead. And I think they should be in universities. But I think going back to what Robert said about the diversity of institutions in the US, I think in the UK we need rather more diversity among our universities. We have nearly 200 universities, and they're all in a single league table. They're all doing mainly 3-year full-time courses for undergraduates. They're all doing research of some kind, and they're really rather too homogeneous. We ought to have some which focus just on undergraduates, and also we need to have more people who go to university not just for 3 years in a row, but go for 1 year, decide they don't like it or want to change, and then go back later. So I think we've got to become more flexible in the UK. And of course, the other thing that's happened, partly through COVID-19, is realizing that quite a lot can be done virtually. Not everything. I mean, personal teaching is very important, but I think big public lectures can frankly be just as well done on or online, where you can watch them again at any time, because there's no feedback between the audience and the speaker in a big lecture anyway. So I think some things can be learnt, and some can be done online even in normal times. But my main point is we need more variety in the UK system.
And also, just to kind of move on to your point about the blue skies research, yes. How do you think that we can continue to encourage perhaps the brightest minds to pursue blue skies research as opposed to perhaps going into finance, going into startups, which is an ever-increasing trend?
Well, I make a distinction. I think it's dismaying how many of our brightest students go into finance. So, and I when I was head of a college, I used to give the graduation day, and I said, some of you guys who are going into finance and faffing around with financial derivatives is far further away from the real world than what's done here, making relationships and having ideas. So the finance, we want far fewer people doing that, but we do want people doing startups. And I think these will be people who may come from research. And incidentally, Cambridge is very good at this. We have lots of startups around Cambridge. And in fact, I'm on the advisory board for a recently established a venture capital fund called Aram. And this advisory board contains 2 Nobel Prize winners, 2 presidents of the Royal Society, the man who invented the world's best-selling drug, Sir Greg Winter, the man who invented the gene sequencing used by Illumina, and the man who invented the iris recognition thing used in the identity cards for 1 billion Indians. And so we do have these people who are on the faculty at Cambridge who have had huge success in startups as well as being academics. So you can combine the two. And in Cambridge, we are lucky to have a sort of not very large city where there's real interaction between these. So the environment where there's an interaction between innovative ideas and academia works very well in Cambridge.
And I suppose perhaps now's a good time to mention your book on the future. And so perhaps can you just give us a few ideas that you touch upon within that book?
Right. Well, my book on the future really was, from my perspective as an astronomer, where we think in terms of long time scales. But my main point was that even though the Earth's been around for 45 million centuries, and it'll be around for 60 million more, this century is special. It's the first when one species, the human species, has the future of the planet in its hands, because there are more of us, they're more empowered by technology. And my book is mainly addressing how technology can be used to help us while we manage to avoid the downside, because the stakes are high, because new technology, of course, offers huge benefits, but also leads to new dangers. And I do discuss education, and I make the point that we need a more flexible kind of education, and also there are more changes in people's lifetimes now than there were in the past. I mean, when the universe was set up in the Middle Ages, things didn't change much from one generation to the next, and they built cathedrals that would be finished in their lifetime. So in a sense, things move slowly, even though they thought the entire world might only last 1,000 years, whereas now we know that the world will last for billions of years, but nonetheless, things are going to change between one generation and the next. And this means that we've got to have flexibility in our institutions. I think it's very important.
And I suppose, speaking about technologies, this is often seen as kind of the application of some of the fundamental principles discovered. And yes. I suppose this kind of perhaps touches a little bit on your book, Robert, about the usefulness of useless knowledge, which is a great title. And I suppose it's in joint with the founder of your institute, Abraham Flexner. And so perhaps you can tell us a few of the ideas in this book.
Well, we already touched upon it when Martin and you spoke about the power of blue skies research. I think the case that was made in that book, and I think it was relevant in the 1930s, but it's even more relevant right now, is that in order to have the real breakthroughs that we need in this society, we just have to be able to concentrate on basic research, understanding the fundamental issues underlying the problem. So there's so many examples now. Think about everything that's happening in the biomedical sphere, even now as we speak, around COVID. Now that would not have been possible if people were not intensely curious in understanding the molecular basis of life, DNA, RNA, proteins, etc. Quantum mechanics was a exotic field in the 1920s. There's just a handful of physicists were interested in understanding how does an atom work. And now we are using it everywhere. I think it's estimated that 30% of our economy is based on quantum mechanics. And I would like to say 100% of reality is based on quantum mechanics. And we get going into a world now where quantum computers exist. So if we really take these lessons serious, we know we have to concentrate on the difficult problems. We have to understand the underlying issues. And we have to attract young people to pursue a career. And coming back, why to deflect them back from finance or startups? I think it's, we should also provide a healthy, stable environment, particularly for young people, to pursue their passion. Because in the end, I think, it's anybody who's really truly interested in a scientific field would love to continue to devote their lives to these subjects. But I think we as society, we should value it. We should actually support it. And I think, attract this kind of great diversity of ideas, of minds. And there's a wonderful ability, I think, of the human mind to envision things that are not here yet, to concentrate on the great unknown. And I think it's a mystery, it's a wonder how effective it has been in the past. And I think, I'm sure Martin agrees that we have only started to explore this great unknown. There are so many much more interesting and fundamental problems there. Yes. So I think that's the great challenge for every society.
No, I agree. I'd just like to make 2 points. I mean, the first is that it's crucially important that academia remains attractive to the brightest young people. And I do worry it's getting more bureaucratic, promotions getting slower, etc. And you'll always get the nerds, people like me who can't do anything else. But you need to get the kind of people who are ambitious and want to feel they've achieved something distinctive by their 30s. And that's now harder in academia than it used to be. And you've got to make sure that we don't lose just those people who are going to be the most creative and most energetic. But I completely agree that people should have the chance to do research and long-term research. And indeed, also in universities, there's now pressure to produce your papers every year, etc., which militates against some of the best kinds of research. But on the other hand, we mustn't be academic snobs. We mustn't say that it's more intellectually elite to do blue skies research and applications. And I like to quote an old cartoon, which all my engineering friends like, which shows two beavers looking up at a big hydroelectric dam. And one beaver says to the other, "I didn't actually build it, but it's based on my idea." And that shows in a realistic way the balance between the effort of having the idea and the often much greater effort of turning it into some entity that works and fulfills a human need, which is what engineers do. So we should be a bit modest and not be sort of elite about academia.
But I mean, if I can add something, I think the qualities that we see very clearly in basic research, the creativity, the depth of ideas, that's something that we need in every field, in every, I would say, any domain of human life. And one thing I noticed, for instance, when I talked about my book, that people in education, people in the tech sector, people in business, people in government said, well, we need some kind of useless knowledge too, right? We should also feel the freedom to explore, even in very, very applied situations. So I think it's not so much a distinction between various walks of life. It's more a certain spirit where you empower human creativity, which I think is something we really need for the future.
And just to kind of follow on from there, thinking about creativity, how as academics, do we begin to attract kind of a wider pool and wider diversity of people into academia, and especially this year, given kind of the social awakening of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how we move past equality, diversity and inclusion just being a box ticking exercise to really being embedded within the institutions and the universities that we're from.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we want to try and do this, and of course we need more role models. We don't have enough, but I think that it is hard because to end up with someone who can be a researcher does require them to have had an education, etc. And it's very hard if someone has had bad luck in their first 10 years of life for them to catch up. We've got to do everything we can, and I certainly feel we ought to have a more flexible admissions policy and try and get people who may not have got over the hoops. And that's why I'm very keen on the idea of not just selecting people over one bar at the age of 18 in universities. We've got to allow people a second chance and to come in. And I think Oxford and Cambridge should certainly do this. They should keep some fracture their places for those who don't come straight from school, but come having done some part-time education or caught up later. So we've got to do more in order to get the variety in, because not only do we need to do this for social justice and fairness, but because we want the greatest variety of creativity in the university, and that will be helped the more of the people we have from different backgrounds. And of course, in physical sciences, there's still a very big gender imbalance, which is only changing rather slowly, and it's changing slowly because it takes a long time to rebalance people in academia, because your reputation in academia depends far too much actually on cumulative record. And so someone who's had a slow start in their career, etc., is going to be handicapped through life in academic appointments if they're done in a traditional way, where you look at how many papers people have written, etc. That's not done in other walks of life. There, you look at what people will do in the next 5 years. Well, academics have to, I think, have a wider set of criteria in deciding appointments.
I fully agree. I think we should widen the opening gate, so to say. But I think we should also rebuild the house that lies behind it. I think the culture of science in general. I think academia is narrow-minded. People should feel at home. I think actually it will be very positive, not only for the quality of research, but also for the kind of spirit and the new ways of collaborating. But also, I think, if you truly take equity serious, it means that it's not just opening the gate, but actually thinking that some people have to travel from much further to come there. So there is a lot that has to be done to reach out much earlier. It's wonderful that you and others are doing this, and coach people, and perhaps also we should be less narrow-minded about what kind of qualities we see. I think people can be very talented in one element, not so much in another. And by some sense, having too many constraints, I think you get exactly what you predict. And so I think it's also opening the minds of the academic community itself that has to happen. I think it will be accelerated if we have a more diverse audience. And there are still so many, I think, biases. And perhaps the most difficult one is the kind of social bias. I think it's very difficult if you're in a different social strata to actually come up. And in fact, there are some ways you could even argue that this has become worse because of all the convoluted entry criteria in top universities. That the stories of rough talent being found and then blossoming in a university becomes more and more difficult. I think there's some kind of a regression happening at this point.
Yes.
Well, just to bring the conversation to a close, of course, we have just a few moments left, and so I suppose everyone is looking to scientists at the moment because of the vaccine for COVID. But what do you think that research really has to do for the future to maintain social progress?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got to obviously continue with the idea of discovering new things, because the second half of the century may be dominated by some technology we can't conceive yet. So it's important that we have some people doing that. But I think the main point is to ensure that all the science we already have is applied beneficially and avoid the downsides, but also applied to the whole world. We've talked about inequality within a country, but what's even worse is the inequalities between nations. And in particular, what's going to be crucially important is to ensure that, for instance, Africa, where the population is growing fast, etc., doesn't lag behind the rest. And so we've got to make sure that the benefits which are enjoyed by those of us in countries like the UK and the US do spread. And so we hope to have a less unequal world. If it's not more unequal, it's going to be a very sort of disturbed and embittered world. So we've got to aim for more equality and more balance, and something like a sort of grand Marshall Plan, like the way the Americans helped Europe after World War II, to help Africa, so that it doesn't lag behind the rest of the world. So we need to make the world more balanced, because the one thing we learned from the pandemic is that we are interconnected. We can't have a disaster in one continent without the other. And in Africa, they all have mobile phones. They may not have toilets, but they have mobile phones, so they know what they're missing. They know the injustice of their fate. Unless we do something about that, we will have an embittered and turbulent world.
And Robert, perhaps you can have one final quick closing remark.
Well, I think it's no doubt that science and technology will become even more important to the future. The question is, can we accept it? Will we connect? So I think it's crucial that we actually make sure that society is connected to science, understands it, accepts it, but also that science listens to society, its needs, its worries, and that we together can actually build that future.
Thank you very much, Martin Rees and Robert Dygast. And back over to you, Joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.